Thank you very much indeed. And good morning, everyone. Just want to know whether this sound is okay. Okay. The talk is entitled Embracing the Dragon of Wisdom. And when I said to Damon a couple of days ago that could he construct for me an image which, because I'm just going to talk to you today about spiritual experience and guidance, could he give me something? He's produced this, which is how the dragon came to me 15 years ago, almost exactly. So not only thank you, Damon, there's a synchronicity going on there, which we shouldn't be too surprised about if we really do realize the one life. And of course there is the acceptance of the idea as a concept on the mental plane of the one life, and it might be very appealing to people, but it has to be realized in the depths of our being. And today's talk is about aspects of the wisdom and of that great second ray of love wisdom. They're not two separate energies. There is one energy of love interacting with wisdom. And we often say, well, my head tells me this, but my heart tells me something else. The second ray of love wisdom can marry these two together in a spiritual bond which can then be used for action on the physical plane. And one of the most spiritual characters in all of Shakespeare's writings, in my belief, it was Portia. And Portia, speaking in the Shakespeare play The Merchant of Venice, is trying to tell the merchant Shylock that he needn't demand his pound of flesh, which he wants. And she says to him, what about the quality of mercy? I want my pound of flesh. She said, do you know, she said, mercy is twice blessed. It blesses those that receive it, but it blesses those, Shylock, who give it. And likewise, the great second ray of love wisdom is blessed with love and with wisdom. And we have to learn to use them in conjunction with one another to bring out the full effect of the soul. And the soul has its centre in the Buddhic plane. I may have been fairly fortunate in the way things have been revealed to me, but it is important to realize the law of cycles, and when you can be expressive and when you need to be receptive. And if you put yourself in a position where you can live the meditative way of life, maybe this means giving up some work in the outside world, some paid work, maybe it means altering the way that you live your life socially, you start to get into contact with the energies that are waiting for you to be ready. And so it's been explained to me the interaction of these energies, and a lot more has followed. And I just wanted to share these, what's made my life have a profound dimension to it. And I'm not pretending that I'm anywhere near there yet. I know I'm not, because I see the horoscopes of some people who have the most horrendous problems to deal with and have a stoical nature, and I wonder, could I be going through what they're going through with their energies? And it's a wonderful privilege to see the unconscious mind spread out in the way it is, and having been trained to understand and interpret that, and to see what people are going through. And sometimes we have no idea of the crosses that people are carrying when they're going through life, but they'll put on a smile and they do what they can for humanity. And so, you may think you're at a certain level, but you've only got to look upwards and you'll see there's an awful lot of people ahead of you. And I think that the second ray, in its essence, teaches the importance of humility, because you're not going to be able to garner spiritual energies if you haven't got at least a degree of humility. And as it was explained to me in the very early days, and I was referenced to the third labour of Hercules, the gathering of the golden apples of the Hesperides. And in this particular labour, Hercules is set off in search of wisdom, like we are in Theosophy. We are off in search of these golden apples of wisdom. There's a lot to this particular labour, but in principle, Hercules is waylaid by Atlas. And Atlas, in true mythological fashion, as Gary would tell you, has the weight of the world on his shoulders. And despite the search, despite the pull, despite the interest and the inspiration to search for these apples of wisdom, Hercules stops and he helps with the load to share the burden with Atlas. And as he does, Atlas's cloak loosened and the golden apples fall around at Hercules' feet. And there are times when you have to put love, not just of your fellow man, but of the other kingdoms of nature, and that is going to be very important in the 7th ray age of Aquarius. We have to put love first, and it interrupts, quite rightly, our path to wisdom. But the wisdom is revealed. We don't always have to search for it if we put the love first when it's needed to be served out. We have to consider that this is a duality playing out, and we have to be discriminative, another 2nd ray energy, as to when to use the love and when to search for the wisdom and then apply the wisdom. Tim Wyatt, who supports this particular summer school so boldly in so much, has a school of applied wisdom. And wisdom is much more than knowledge, as we'll see. Knowledge is a 5th ray, which is a ray of attribute, other than the 2nd ray, which is a ray of aspect, and of course is one of the major trinity. And so this idea of the two interacting are very nicely portrayed by the Roman numeral 2, where we have 2 strands, love and wisdom, but they're connected in the glyph. And of course that's the glyph of the astrological sign of Gemini. And Gemini is the 3rd sign of the zodiac and relates to the 3rd labour of the gathering of the golden apples of the Hesperides. And so there's a nice smooth understanding that we don't enter a wisdom path without knowing that we can engage with the love path. And put another way, love at the heart is the Christ principle, and wisdom at ajna or brow is the Buddha principle. These are the great 2 teachers that we all depend. The flow of masters through the hierarchy is very important to understand that we have these 2, and they teach us different things through different lives. But there may come a point in our lives where we are required, if we are receptive and we are ready, and we are free to do the work. We heard Tim the other day talk about Dharma. We have our duties, we have our responsibilities. The Dharma can be very strong and it can be almost karmic. And the soul knows this because it's set the landscape for our lives in any case. And it indicates that in the personal horoscope. And so we start to move towards understanding a synthesis of our being. And in esoteric astrology, there's a sign for the earth, and it's a circle with a cross in it. And if we go to a Christian church, they have Father, Son, and the Holy Ghost. The interpretation I've been given this is that we all have to develop along the lines of vertical integration and horizontal integration. And horizontal integration, this is the first point on the handout, horizontal integration is your life as you lead it in the outer world. Your friends, your relatives, your partners, your work, it may be spiritual, it may be service work, which is highly spiritual, and it's all horizontal. And then there's the vertical axis. And the vertical axis is something which we struggle more with because we've had what? 300, 400, 500 lifetimes on the path where we've been interested in the horizontal, and we come back into this life and it's the horizon. And somebody says, meditate. No, there's things outside. No, meditation, study, contemplation, as Susan said yesterday, connecting with nature, bring us back to the centre and start to build a channel where we can get the flashes of intuition. The lowest house in the horoscope is the 4th house, and the 4th labour of Hercules is the capture of the doe or hind. And the doe or hind's in the forest. Well, there it is there. I got it a moment ago. No, it's gone now. It's gone. No, there it is. And we get these flashes. But as has been said this week, we don't always recognise these flashes are very important signposts. And so I believe in writing out in the spiritual diary when we get these flashes, because the flashes will become greater and more continuous the more receptive you are. And this brings us to the law of cycles. We have to know when to be expressive and when to be receptive. There is the sine wave which tells us as we go through an expressive period, we can be pulled to this horizontal integration, and we can do very well with it. But then as the sine wave drops down and we're required to be receptive, we keep going up and things start to go wrong. People say, I've had this taken away and I've had that. I say, what do you think your soul is trying to tell you? Have you got time to study? I have now. It's all been taken away. Have you got time to meditate? I have now, because what else can I do? And the soul's saying, good, get on with it. Because when we go to sleep, what happens to consciousness? You see, consciousness is a point of energy that has no location in time and space as we understand it. When we're 16 hours awake, as we are hopefully now, I wish I hadn't stayed up so late last night, talking about theosophical things, wonderful conversation with Ron, it's a bit long. We understand that consciousness is anchored to the brain, the cortex of the brain, and it gives us the ability through the brain to sense the outside world. But what happens to consciousnness when we go to sleep? First of all, before we consider death, when we go to sleep, it goes off somewhere into the inner worlds, we would say, and it may go to the astral world, the etheric, the astral, the mental, the spiritual even, but it may go to strange compartments that our brains cannot begin to interpret for us because it's otherworldliness. And so that's vertical. But we tend to dismiss our dreams as well, often. Not everybody, but often. Oh, yes, yeah, I said, look, I couldn't make it. But they can be clear. And they will be clear and they will be persistent if you don't have that receptive time in the day for something to be dropped in via the intuition. And if we can slow our thoughts down, and they may be going like this, if we can flatten them out and almost stop them so that we create a space between thoughts in waking consciousness, we can get an image dropped in that may be very important, that if we don't do would have to come through a dream. And if we don't understand or remember our dreams, then the message can be lost. And this is working on the vertical. I work a lot with symbols, doing a lot of astrological work and interpretations, and it helps to thin the veil. You're working with higher manas, and that is the bridge between lower mind and buddhi. And buddhi is higher than higher manas. And what I was exhorted to do was to go into the realms of the wisdom and understand what I'm dealing with and the nature of the energies that I'm dealing with, and then bring it out and use it to express the love energy where the love is needed. And that often means taking on board with people circumstances that they need meaning for. And this meaning requires an understanding of the law of cause and effect. Because if we simply stay on this horizontal plane, this idea of the outer world, we're going to be thrown around on a sea of effects. Oh, this has happened now. If that happens, and whatever it is, and it's effect. And we're not getting back to the cause of it. And of course, the law of cause and effect is karma. And if we don't want to carry on multiplying our number of lives with we need to see the causes of what is happening. And the cause isn't outside. There's a trigger outside that brings the issue into your life. But the cause has been set by the horoscope when the soul has read the records of your permanent atoms, and it knows what you've achieved physically, emotionally, mentally, and spiritually, what you've deposited in the banks of Atma, Buddhi and Manas in your last life and your previous lives to that. It knows where you're at, and it sets you a map which drives you a number of stages further to a holistic nature. And in that there will be some work on the horizontal and some work on the vertical. And my belief is, as we tread the path further and further, we reach a point where we have some intense lives of vertical, but we build the Antakarana, we have the link with the soul, and then it's outward work, it's service work. And the beings who look after us in the inner worlds are of two streams. One stream looks after our personal physical development and the spiritual development, and the other looks after our growing service contribution to humanity and the other kingdoms. And so we are searching for a meaning, and the time brings in, because of an overlay of a moving chart, which we call progressed, onto a natal chart, time brings in events. We call them events, and I'm looking at portion number 2 in the handout, which is talking about try to see the events and circumstances in your life as energy in action, because that's what it is. And if we were to live our lives and be completely going with the flow of the horoscope, we would learn our lessons much more quickly and with much less angst. But when something happens in our life and we don't like it, we start to put up a resistance, and that slows the process down and foils the soul somewhat in getting through the necessary modifications that are needed. And the modifications that are needed are vehicles of consciousness. Vehicles of consciousness, not consciousness itself. And there is much identification of our consciousness with these vehicles. And we perhaps don't like to look at our physical actions too closely, or certainly not our emotional reactions to things, or even our mental plotting and planning. If we're trying to manipulate circumstances to please ourselves, and I'm sure people here don't do that, but we've got the free will to use the energy that we've got. And of course, we're not told about the law of karma on the involutionary path or the outgoing path, because karma and reincarnation are intimately connected in such a way that if we didn't make mistakes and we didn't incur karma, we wouldn't be reincarnating. And so we're allowed so many lives before we become interested in theosophy, interested in karma. And sometimes I say to somebody, this is a difficult karmic indication here, you've got a T-square in fixed signs or whatever, and they say, what does that mean? I said, well, the emotional I was bad. I said, listen, you must not beat yourself up about karma, because it is a necessary part of the evolution of spirit into matter. Because spirit into matter can't be done in a life, it has to be done in a number of lives, and karma is a key essence of that reincarnatory mechanism. And we're not supposed to know and work to divine law. We're supposed to work through a certain degree of chaos before we work back to order. And so we shouldn't be too hard on ourselves when we realise that we're in the middle of a karmic difficulty. And the idea is that a lot of this work that we will have to be doing is redemptive work. It's work of things below the subconscious. And I was meditating on redemption only a few weeks ago as part of a talk that I'm doing now. And the dragon appeared and said, remember to tell them there's never redemption without forgiveness. Without the ability to forgive, the matter remains unresolved, unredeemed. And therefore, forgiveness is a second-rate quality where the heart says, as far as I'm concerned, there is no wound. And it releases, in the dual way that the second ray works, both the person who has needs the forgiveness and the person who forgives. And so we're interested in redemption. As people interested in the esoteric, it's all 12th house matters, we're interested in bringing things to the surface. And we had a very interesting talk by David earlier in the week about the need to face the negative side of our emotional lives, our passionate lives, through this idea of the dweller on the threshold of consciousness. And this is another expression, in my view, for the redemptive process that has to take place in each and every one of us. And so we look to supporting mechanisms within Theosophy itself. And we know that the masters work top down. They are working from their standpoint and giving us what we need to understand. But here on earth, we're required to make an effort. And this idea of effort is very, very important, because if we want to become individuals who have got a higher monastic contribution to make, we have to go to that plane of higher Manas and pull it into our vehicles. Because remember, we have a physical body, but we have a physical earth. We have an emotional body, but there's an astral world. We have a mental body, and there's a mental world. And of course, they are of the same substance. And not just higher Manas, what about Buddhi? Every time you take compassion in your heart and give it out, every time you empathize or embrace another with your love, you pull down Buddhi from the Buddhic plane into your aura. And if you do it repeatedly, ceremoniously, seventh ray ceremony, again and again, you set up an energy vortex between the Buddhic plane or the higher mental plane. And I didn't really understand this until somebody gave me a chapter, a book written by Sebastian Coe, who won a couple of gold medals going back a bit now, very successfully organised the very well attended and popular Olympics in London in 2012, talking about how he won his second gold medal. And he's describing the circumstances at the end of the race. And he's saying that I was racing along, and the African was on the inside, and I realised that I just needed one more effort. I was getting behind, and I just needed one more effort to go. And as I invoked the will to get over, it was as if I pulled down fire from heaven, and it got me over the line. And my understanding now is he'd reached the plane of Atma and pulled down fire into his aura, and he took it over. So every act of divine persistent will allows you, in other words, the will of the divine, when we understand from our theosophical teachings what the will of the divine is, not my will, but thy will be done, something that's not related to the personal life, but the impersonal life is pulled down. We can start to build into our auras these spiritual qualities. And as we do, they will start to flow into their lower vehicle correspondences. Atma to the physical body, Buddhi to the astral body, and higher Manas into lower Manas, and help to redeem those vehicles of consciousness. So in serving, we are served. as has been said, in loving we are loved. But we have to make that effort to do these things, and we have to search for meaning, because without meaning we're not informed enough to take the action we need in any given set of circumstances. And this is why discrimination on the path is so important, because we're coming to science, and science is working hard. And science, they're working bottom up, with the masters top down and science bottom up. And I'm a physicist by academic training, and the world of physics has been turned upside down in the last 100 years. They really have had a shaking with the advent or the understanding of the energy and the advent of the thinking around the quanta, this packet of energy that has changed things. And it's only 115 years old, quantum theory, and it's having already a huge impact on thinking. 10 or 15 years ago, you wouldn't have picked up a copy of a scientific magazine like Scientific American and see a headline about consciousness. I haven't got one with me, but I've got one from 2010 that says, could the physical universe be underlain silently by another universe in another matter? And this matter is quantum, or is it dark energy or dark matter? And of course they're working, and if they are working bottom up, my view, having looked at the subject, and it's interesting, I did the mathematics of classical physics and quantum physics at university. I didn't know it would come round to bite me again in a different way. But they're arguing about what consciousness is. They can't agree. There are a number of interpretations of what consciousness is about. And the one I understand nowadays that taught at university is this idea that nothing can be manifest without an observer. Nothing can, and so if there's nobody in this room observing that loudspeaker over there, it's not in manifestation. But we particularize the wavicular by our observations. And we had an interesting workshop, the second one I did, where we looked at this link between quantum physics and consciousness. And in the third part of the handout, I've pointed out this tremendously important concept of complementarity. Complementarity, something born by one of the forefathers or forerunners, whatever, of the quantum theory in the early days, along with Einstein, was a chap called Niels Bohr. He was a Danish guy. And he understood that the wavicular nature of an energy like an electron or a photon, and its particular nature were mutually exclusive. And we could say, and I'm now going to use the hermetic axiom, as above, so below, and turn it on its head and say, as below, so above. My view is that the secrets of the inner worlds are being given to us in the principles of quantum physics. And whilst I'm not going to say that the quantum world is everything, I am going to say that it may be shown ultimately that the quantum world refers to and is the demonstration of the etheric layer. I believe that dark matter will be shown to be the astral world, and dark energy the mental world into the spiritual. And that's a view again from deep meditation. But the interesting thing is we're moving above the physical, and we're finding that the laws of the etheric, or the wavicular if you like, are totally different. We might have thought that the micro world might have shrunken versions of the laws of the classical physics. None of it. And as I say, the physicists are at odds as to which of these interpretations, and there are several of them, and the most popular seems to be, because of Niels Bohr, the Copenhagen. But has Theosophy got there first? Don't we talk about a being, a planetary logos, sometimes given the name Sanat Kumara, of a family of Kumaras, who actually is called the Ancient of Days, the silent watcher? And maybe for a universe to be held in manifestation for a Manvantara, there needs to be a very highly placed observer. And that is interesting to me, because Theosophy may have got there first without realizing it, but now New Scientist, which comes out every Thursday in this country, and I always check out what's in it, is talking about consciousness. It's talking about realms. It's even saying, and they must have hated saying this, that perhaps astrology is part of the quantum paradigm. What? Science and astrology? And that if such things as entanglement and non-locality are the case, then maybe planetary energies can affect human beings and energies from the constellation. Douglas Baker finished doing his work. He said to several in the group, to Gary, who's here with us this week, and somebody else called Paul, I haven't quantumized the astrology and I haven't got long left. You have got to do it. And I'm writing a book, and Gary will be helping me and doing other work as well. He's got his own book this year, and I have to say that book is a masterpiece. Not because Gary's a friend of mine, but because he's able to pull in first ray energy, and there's a no waffle approach, and the first ray is highly synthetic, and he's pulled it together. The Baker strands, the Joseph Campbell, the Young, and I think he deserves to sell as many copies as he has, and I'm in absolute... And I've read plenty of esoteric books in my life. We're in the throes of moving, and they've said to me, 90% of your books can't go with you. What? When we're attached to something, it takes up our energy. And I have to make a new start in a new house with just the 10% that I need. And of course, I've got planets in Taurus, and that's very attaching. And we like the past. We like to think, my wife said to me, what's that? I said, it's a school report. She said, what do you want a school report? I said, it's really good. What do you keep in this book, she said, on electromagnetism for? You know all that. I said, that was a history prize I got. Look, there's a little... We do have to let go of these things, because they take, and I accept it, they take energy, and that energy can be available for further service work and what's important. And I think I've had a bit of a shaking in the last few months because of this, and because I haven't perhaps read the script as much as I would like to. And so we have this idea of science and this idea of non-locality. Again, this idea, there's a famous story of a guy in America working for the CIA called Cleve Baxter, who was very hungry. He went out for lunch, he was doing work on the lie detector machine, and he bought some brine shrimps, a huge pot as you get in America, don't you, Tim? Yeah, everything seems big. A huge pot of shrimps over in one corner there, and he said, right, half there, and he started to boil up these here, and as soon as he started to boil up there was a reaction in the brine shrimps over there. And there's lots and lots of stories about this. The point is, there is entanglement between those brine shrimps that had lived together in the sea before they were caught, and there's a wave function that exists. We don't see it, but it exists. And we know it exists because we meet people and we know we've been entangled with them before. We know because this entanglement lives past the death and the rebirth into the next life. It's an energy that is independent of time. And this can bring us back to resolve with other people issues that we haven't resolved, and it can keep things going. And I always say, be careful with whom you entangle, and make sure it is of the quality of vibration that you want to be working with at that time. And of course, we entangle with each other here. This is, I don't know, about the 8th summer school I've been to, and the entanglement is always so pleasant because we're using second ray energy, which is cohesive, and we're supportive of each other, and we're interested in each other's stories, and we listen, and we're friendly. And this is the great second ray of love wisdom, which is going to be supplemented by 2 more rays in the age of Aquarius. And I've talked a little bit about science to say that the idea of science is bringing in concepts like complementarity. And just to take that a little bit further, I believe that we have to see our spiritual nature and our material nature, wavicular and particular, as being the spiritual and the material. And we mustn't see that the material existence is getting in the way of our spiritual life, and that our spiritual life mustn't just be, just like we say to the materialists of the world, you need to raise your vibrations, take the greed and the selfishness out of things, open up your heart to humanity. We say that. We mustn't, when we're down here for a reason. And if we're being manipulated by spirit, and they're perfectly entitled to use any of us and to manipulate us, and it's our privilege to serve them if we get the chance, if we are being manipulated, then we are down here doing their work because they are discarnate. We are incarnate. And we're not incarnating to get out of incarnation. That may be the plan generally, but we've got the age of Aquarius to look forward to. We're in the transition period, and we talked a little bit about that at the panel, but I'm thinking now of what's required in the age of Aquarius. And it's clear to me, reading the literature, that there is a blueprint. There is a blueprint in the inner worlds held by hierarchy, and it's on a group basis. It's on a cooperative basis. It's on a collective basis. It's on a sharing basis. And we have to rearrange our society across the world on this basis. And I've seen it described in the Bailey literature as, and create a heaven on earth. So for any of us, there's no escaping off the wheel of birth, and we've got to come down here and do our bit to beautify the planet. And it depends on how much your head and how much your heart are working in cooperation to do that. And of course, in the age of Aquarius, we're going to be required to work in groups. We're already doing it. Again, I like to refer to the horoscope, because when everything else clutters around, you've got something to fall down on. Talking to Ron last night, the zodiac, the 12 houses. The 5th house is the house of the individual, and you can be knocked about in your chart quite a lot by matters retaining to the 5th house. People say, I have to work with this guy, I don't like him at all, I'm made the scapegoat. But our emotional bodies and our mental bodies get knocked around until in the end we emerge with a profile in life. So I can stand up and I can do this. And then they say, we can use that person. There's someone who's not going to fragment at the first conflict in life, who's not going to give up because the first hurdle's a little bit higher than they want to jump. They actually can see where we're up to in our development. But having developed individual self-consciousness, 5th house Leo, and we're just at the tail end of the Leo full moon. And I should say at this point that I consider the full moon meditation to be very, very important, because it can take us, even if we're not astrologers, it can take us through the qualities of the astrological signs, just as the 12 labours of Hercules can take us through the qualities of the astrological signs. And we can't really pretend to understand our fellow man until we can understand ourselves. And we can't understand ourselves until we understand the gamut, the range of energies that are playing in and around us. And so the full moon meditation says, okay, have it in bite-sized chunks. Have a month between them, but here are the qualities of the full moons. If you go to the Lucis Trust website, you can tune in to a live full moon meditation held in London and also in New York. And the idea is that at the full moon, of course it's the sun's energies, but at the full moon there is a greater radiation of spiritual light. We are able to move more closely to that kingdom of hierarchy which exists above the human kingdom. And so the idea that we're moving in the age of Aquarius brings the question, the Theosophical Society, which is so dear. I'm not as an older member of the Theosophical Society as many of you are, but I appreciate so much talking to people who have had more Theosophy than I. But what I do know is that the 3 rays that are required in the Aquarian age are very much corresponding to the objects of the Theosophical Society, and they're not that difficult to put together. And in the 4th part of what I've given you on your sheet, you will see the triangle that is the age of Aquarius with those 3 rays. And it doesn't take us very long to see that ray 2 is the ray of love, wisdom, and of course it corresponds to that all-important first objective of the brotherhood of man, regardless of race, creed, etc. We know it so well, but it has to be realized in the Aquarian age, not just a lovely concept that we can talk about. It has to be realized. And the 2nd ray, in its highly synthetic manner, with the indigo colors that so intuitively, and intuition as well, is in that picture there. We see it when we go out, if we're not too near a town or a city maybe, and it's a clear night, no clouds. We see the stars, but we see that indigo midnight blue, and we feel pulled into it. This is the synth. Humanity's got to be embraced and pulled together in a loving synthesis that the Aquarian age has got to produce. But out of that, there has to be the support of ray 5, which is the scientific ray. And it's quite clear that the scientific ray is important in Theosophy, and I've put there the importance in the 2nd and the 3rd object of science, and the work that science is doing. You know, the unexplained laws of nature include the fact that it is not understood by science why a particle heading for 2 slits turns itself into waves. The waves then interfere, cause an interference pattern, and we get black light, etc. And if we as a human being look at that interference pattern, it collapses. And so science is working on the intervention of consciousness in the energies around. And it's going to be very important, because this is not just the science, it's the ray of knowledge. And the youngsters want to know. They're not interested so much in belief. They need to know. And the age of Aquarius, with its glyph, is also synonymous with www. And yes, of course, 5 minutes. And then questions.
Maybe 5 minutes.
5 minutes. Okay. I want to. Thank you. My time has gone quicker than I thought it would be. But the point here, so we can get some questions in. The point here that you can see from that triangle that the Theosophical Society has a massive part to play in the Aquarian age, if my ray correlations are correct. I have to just finish on this note about the 7th ray, because I've talked about the 2nd, the 5th, the 7th ray. And the 7th ray is that ray which will bring in the spiritualizing of matter. I've put that in, or precipitation, which is magic. And I have to read something to finish from Discipleship in the New Age. And that is that the 7th ray will involve us intervening much further, particularly in the 3rd and 4th kingdoms. And those of us who've got a pull towards the animal kingdom will appreciate this, that the 7th ray age of Aquarius will bring in a close synthesis and sympathetic coordination with the animal kingdom, particularly those we are domesticating. And there will be extraordinary occurrences of animal mediumship under human inspiration, and these will take place. We have an energy that comes from us that isn't just meant for us to share. We're meant to lift all the kingdoms of nature by radiation. And that radiation comes from the heart, informed by the head and put into practice in loving service by the heart. And then we will be operating truly on the duality, the perceived duality, but it is a unity of love and wisdom. Thank you very much indeed.